It's really an honor to be here. One of the reasons that it is an honor, among many, is that when I was publisher at Jaded Ibis Press, ABR was very generous to the press in terms of reviewing our books and talking to us in an interview about the press itself. And it's a quality magazine. I read every issue, and I'm now living in Portugal, so I'm trying to figure out a way to get the current issues to me. I have two introductions, brief introductions to this, and I think some of you already know that I'm going to be talking about landscape as character. I'm not going to talk about that until afterwards. If people have more questions, I think some of what I'm talking about or reading from will be apparent. The first introduction is, last night, Dr. DeLeo climbed up on his roof to look at stars.
Okay. Thank you. Without a ladder.
Yeah, he flew up. Second introduction. A farm is a microcosm that tumbles in upon itself toward perpetual reawakening. Seasons bend and deluge without simplistic demarcations and calendars, an endlessness to ends and beginnings, rains flooding or skies withholding, ponds iced or thick with algae, and the black loam teeming. I search for the moments in between when what is obscured by the obviousness of what has been or will be. The unambiguous thunderstorm, the gooseberries gone black on the bush, the swifts turning at twilight. I'm sure it's there, in the unresolved, unsolved middle, where we onlookers are unmade or made better. I'm going to read from 3 different books. And I was trying to find a thread for you all, and the thread is maggots and flies. This is from, wrong one. This is from part 1 from Drought, 1997 is when the book was published. House. The house sits 120 yards from a bleached gravel road beneath 2 misplaced elms that offer little shade except in the evening when a dry wind rises from the valley and shade is no longer necessary. It is a white house, small and anemic beneath a white sun. The paint on the clapboard peels away from the grayed wood and falls like confetti among the stunted shrubs and dying flowers. On the side facing east, a mound of dirty sand partially blocks the wide, dark entrance of a basement, half finished, then abandoned to decay. Weather inhabits this yawn. In winter, it moves deeper and upward into the house so that when the man and woman shout or make love or battle nightmares, their breath is visible. But it's June now. It's summer. There's just heat inside and out. Woman. Her name is Willa. Her father was illiterate. He named her after that particular species of tree with long, thin branches like a woman's hair. Willow. But he said, Willa, weeping Willa. Except she never cries, not anymore and not for years. When she was 9, her 2 big cousins raped her and then burned a tiny heart onto the white skin over her breastbone with a hot pocket knife. The burn blistered, then scabbed over, then became a scar. It was then she decided crying heals nothing. Unlike her father, she is educated, the only one in the family to finish college. Unfortunately, she studied art. Yet less than a continuing poverty, she fears her family history of ignorant violence, which she suspects may be genetic and therefore inescapable. Drowning in air. To the east of the dirty sand pile, a bed of chalky limestone juts outward, forming the low cliffs that overlook a valley. The road into this valley is a south road, south of the cliffs, south of the house. It's made of dirt. When the rains come, it turns soft and the pickup tires plow deep ruts into it. But it hasn't rained for nearly a month, so the road is hard and dry. When the pickup heads down into the valley, clouds of yellow dust rise behind it and hang for a moment in the hot, still air. In the valley, there's an old, wide, deep pond stocked with bass and crappie and bluegill. Beyond the pond are hills covered with timber. Among the timber is a creek that feeds the pond in spring when the snow melts and the rains come and the water overflows the creek bank and rushes down the hillside. The creek is almost dry now. The pond's water level steadily declines. Its perimeter shrinks. Fish leap above the surface all day long as if fleeing the thickening crowds below, as if trying to drown themselves in air. Self-portrait. She bends over a wooden table that rests against her left thigh and picks up a misshapen oil tube paint. A tube of oil paint. A brown strand of hair falls from her chignon onto her white neck where tiny beads of sweat gather, slide away, then gather again. Every window in the house is open. There are no screens. Insects fly in and out day and night. As she unscrews the cap from the tube, a flesh fly lands on her left elbow. She blows on it twice in short, audible breaths. It rises, circles her head, then lands on her right shoulder. Again, she blows on it, and again, it rises and circles. It settles on her forehead, just above her left eyebrow, a fraction of an inch from a large bead of sweat that's about to slide away. She pushes her lower lip outward and blows. The sweat slides. The fly bites. From Bill Buford's Bug Book for Beginners, Volume 4. Flesh flies lay their eggs on decaying organic matter such as dead animals, rotting fish, or manure. The amount of eggs is vast. Newly hatched larvae of just a few flies make a corpse wriggle and squirm as if it were alive again. For 2 years, she painted nothing but delicate watercolors of insects, illustrations for an entomologist who writes bug books for children. Now, when she paints a self-portrait, she sees antennae instead of hair, labrum instead of lips, and rising behind her head, sprouting from her shoulders, wings. Light. With 2 fingers, she squeezes the tube until a small white spot of paint appears on the glass palette. Her shoulders rise as she inhales through her nose, then slowly fall. She lifts her head. With her left hand, she reaches toward the table, picks up a brush, and carefully lowers it onto the small white spot on the glass. When her hand rises again, it trembles almost imperceptibly. A bright flash of light enters through the window behind her, striking the rivers of sweat, the edge of the comb protruding from her chignon, the golden hairs of her left forearm, the white tip of the brush raised in a false salute. Her eyes are gray and cold, like granite. They shift to the left, away from the brush, as her head turns toward the window into the light. Landscape. From this window, there is only the struggling green of trees, the yellow grass, the bright purple of thistleheads, and in the distance, beneath the pale sky growing paler, the low valley and pond lying prone at the feet of the opposite hills. I feel surrounded here, suffocated. It's as if each day God reneges and takes back a wedge of air. Heron. The oar moves in slow, deliberate strokes through the water, first on the left, then on the right. Within the ripples gathering on the surface is the distorted reflection of an arm, its muscles contracting with each downward swing of the oar. At the far end of the pond, where the bank shifts from clay to bush, a diseased elm stands dying against the colorless sky. A single branch, skeletal, a dry gray bone, sways from the sudden weight of a great blue heron. The bird cocks its head to the side, listening, then forces a mournful call into the silence it discovers. The oar stops, the muscles relax. Man. The man's first name is Kale, the surname of his maternal grandfather. It's an old name, at one time significant in this poor rural county, synonymous with land and therefore wealth. Now everyone surnamed Kale is in the cemetery. They're dead. No one thinks of them except the groundskeeper who arranges his tending schedule according to family plots, and so considers the Cales, along with the Millers and the Talbots, only on Thursdays. Cale does not even think of the Cales until someone suggests his name was derived from a variety of cabbage, a comment that he sometimes, though not always, feels obliged to dispute. Rain. He looks up at the sun and closes his eyes. He drops a hand over the side of the canoe and folds his palm around the warm water. He removes his glasses and lifts the wet palm and rubs it over his face and thinks of rain, how it would green the drying fields, how it would put meat back on the cattle, fill their shriveled udders, how it would be nice to wake early some morning to the sound of water rushing from the eaves, a mist coming through the window and onto the bed, the woman wrapping her legs around his waist, her nipples growing hard, palatable in the cool, damp air. Pond. When he puts his glasses back on, his eyes move out over the shuddering pond. They climb onto the hard clay bank, sift through the stubble and weeds of the valley, ascend the white wall of cliffs, peer through the big open window that looks out over the cliffs and yellowing valley and quiet pond. This pond, where the man is just now dipping his oar into the water, the canoe turning in such a way that it catches the sun and sends a single ray of light out over the landscape, a single ray that does not stop until it strikes the white tip of a brush poised in midair. Name. She turns into the light, to no one, not even herself. She says, Cale. Next, we will move to 2007. I left one out. There was one in between, just for the time constraint, but I assure you it also contained maggots. This is from the Jiri Chronicles 2007, and it's the last story in the sequence of story. And I should add that the Jiri Chronicles was a 13-year project, and it included over 500 pieces of prose, poetry, video, music, including real albums by the death metal band Umlaut, which was Jiri's invention. And Jiri, of course, is my invention. And it also included consumer products, websites, etc. This being the last story, it ends essentially with the end of the world. Am I not a fly like thee? William Blake. This blue bottle fly has never seen a human, never drank the bald primate's oil or spit or salt, ate its shit, laid eggs in the soft rotting flesh. Here, no worlds collide. Winds hollow by the time it reaches these old black gum and bur oak and hickory trees, writing rings of time in their wooden hearts. Water moves, sun lights, prairie grass bows to creatures with hearing so keen that fungus spreadings like thunder a quarter hour away in spring. Buzz loudly. No one swats or complains, not even the black she-bear licking her bleeding paw. Smell the sweet, oozing stench. Find the wound. Leave your squirming cosmic mark, your opalescent legacy, your hungry, lovely, holy white maggots of God. These sections are from, they were marginalia in the story. They are essentially from the Fly Bible. Chapter verse. And so I am ready, some little death a gap through which to squeeze my splendid soul. Caliphora vomitoria, Caliphora vomitoria, Caliphora vomitoria. Oh, how fleeting's life. And as you'll see, I have to skip over some sections to get to the maggots. Dr. Samuel J. Crumbine of Dodge City, Kansas, tried to save Kansas from its scourge of flies by urging citizens to install window screens in their homes. They say he created the slogan, "Swat the fly," After attending a baseball game where flies lodged in the eyes of shortstops and fielders ran after fly balls and crowds chanted to batters, "Swat the ball." Oh, yes, it all made sense. And so when school teacher Frank Rose showed Crumbine his fly bat, which was a ruler with a square of wire mesh attached, the good doctor renamed it Fly Swatter. Sadly, Crumbine could not foresee the colossal corporate pig farms and cattle feedlots stinking up the 20th century landscape, filling water tables with shit and piss, stew pots of fucking flies. Real estate developer Jiri takes a room at a motel in Lyman, Kansas, the tiny town where he hopes someday soon to connect the suburban sprawl of Kansas City to the suburban sprawl of Denver. Upon entering the dank room, he exclaims, "What the fucking shithole." He sees a fly swatter on the nightstand and assumes a maid has accidentally left it behind. He picks it up with 2 fingers and throws it out the door into the parking lot. That night, he dreams poetic of Emily Dickinson tickling his lips and nose with her eyelashes. An intense humming swells in his ears, and he has a wet dream. He wakes in sticky darkness to find his face and hands covered with flies and suspects he has died and gone to hell. Still breathing, he is half right. He's in Kansas. Unable to go back to sleep, he loads his hookah with opium and smokes himself into delirium. An adolescent fly alights on the cinder block wall. He presses a finger of semen onto the slippery beige paint. The fly hesitates, then crawls to drink. Oh, my pretty insect, my poetess of carcass and corpse, bending now so lowly small I see my own fraught eyes shimmer in your belly's blue. Fly Bible, chapter verse. What the maggot denies itself quivers at the edge of every issue's fate. For I am master of this race toward oblivion. I suckle the bloody teats of beast, gnaw gorgeous in my lurid bloat. Here in this unsullied wildness, few adult flies live through cold winters. Those that do survive by sinking into a slumber so deep not even the smell of shit can wake them. Not even the smell of shit-eating pigs eating shit and shitting shit before spring comes and the trefoil, the truffle hunters, turn the sows loose to search the woods for the sexy smell of truffles they'll root out along with blue bottle pupae buried sleepy and ripening in the fine black dirt. Fly Bible, chapter verse. The maggot is a power in this world like no other, ordained to turn flesh into water, to irrigate with vomit the soil of perpetual life, change the corpse to seed, seed to flower, flower to nut, nut to feed the corpse to be in this rectangle of life with me, its magnificent God's eye. And next, sorry, I got a runny nose. This is 2017 from a book I just completed, and it's called Selling the Farm, Descants from a Recollected Past. And it's essentially a lyric memoir, short lyric essays, or hybrid, whatever. I don't like labels. I should credit Triquarterly published 5 of these, and this one is from the Triquarterly review. Farm objects, animate or not, pass season to season without stagger. Like a deity, the animals must have thought my father, moving year-long from hay pasture to crop field, from timber to creek crossing, pausing only to inspect the light, the weather on its way, then toss the salt blocks from the truck bed, break the pond ice with the axe, fill the troughs, make life livable, a sun turn longer. That one fine object in 880 acres of incalculable carbon organisms, what worth beyond my recollection? Seriously, can we elevate the dead with language the dead can't comprehend? A felled white oak tree, for example, so grand we raced upon its 100-foot length 5 feet off the ground. Our pirate ship, our hull adrift from family squalls. How long it must have lain in woodland shadows so as to gather within its slow moldering such fecund gardens of moss and fungi, skittering zoos of springtails and salamanders, red squirrels and striped skunks. 100 years certainly passed before that oak's trunk weakened and came down in a full-blown wind or ice or weight of ice. 100 years, too, our old house had sat shifting on its stone foundation by the time we arrived in 1961 to inhabit its wild critter warrens. We scampered, we scavenged, we shared our hollows with rats and mice, spiders and millipedes, bees slipping through window panes and flies laying eggs on light bulbs, and a mother and father breeding upstairs, one more child to fill one more hollow opening wide inside mother's heart, a torn mouth's soundless scream as dreams like dry leaves quaked and fell around her. When a tree falls in the forest, there's always someone to hear it crash, something nestled in a darkness of its own making, listening. The house, too, would come down around us, time after time, until at last, but until then, the sunset shed a pink skin on the stucco facade year long as we stayed. The 6 rooms shrank as we grew, suffocated us, and far away would never be far enough. Until now. So many dead. That moss on the oak trunk was green velvet under my hands. The scarlet cups brimmed with rainwater. Overhead on a branch of a sapling, a nuthatch wondered at my species, invasive and wrathful, all of us ripping away the old bark to expose the pill bugs beneath. The bird scolded us, then flew away. My siblings stripped twigs and poked and prodded the bugs' boreholes. I looked beyond the swaying branch at the bow blue sky darkening toward winter slate. I was 13, on the cusp of a second life. The beauty I found that day was only sadness. The oak was dead, the moss torn, the nuthatch would return to eat the pill bugs. Thank you.